On Ruma, there is a large forest ruled by one of the great Glivolu beast tribes called Wormtide. The forest itself was said to be the birthplace of the crocodile god Sero. In the earlier times of Ruma's history, many Rumans mistook the crocodile god to be a dragon, hence why the forest was called Wormtide. This forest being the home of a giant crocodile made sense, as it was mostly covered in swamps. On top of that, it was rare for it to not be raining in Wormtide, so with that information you can gather the name's meaning. In the middle of Wormtide was a large tree that was said to stand so tall it went up into the clouds and went above the rain itself. This was the great tree of Oakren. The tale of Sero's birth can be narrowed down to this mighty tree, as the base of it was said to open up, presenting the crocodile god to the planet of Ruma. The ironic part was that this territory was now the home of the Glivolu, while Sero was busy in Magia aiding Claudius's reign as emperor. Many Glivolu were angered with the crocodile god for this very reason, so much so that even though the Glivolu ruled Wormtide, they didn't necessarily stay there. A few settlements and homes here and there, but Wormtide was more of a place you pass through to get to your destination than somewhere you build a home. However, this was the complete opposite for the fairies who found their way to Wormtide. The first fairies to arrive began to build a civilization within the Oakren tree. Since no Glivolu tribes lingered in Wormtide, nor did they station anyone to protect the Oakren tree, there was no one to deny the fairies access to the tree. On top of that, once the village had been made, the entrance was too small to be seen by the average eye, so no one would even be able to tell that the fairies had moved in. This fairy village within the great Oakren tree would be known as Aqua to the fairies, an obvious name with the rainy locale it was placed in. Even if the fairies didn't experience the rain as much as someone on the outside of the tree, the rain still affected their livelihood and resource management. The fairies quickly set up numerous buildings within Aqua, including a town hall, taverns, inns, and many marketplaces. Among them was a tavern known as Leafy Mills, where a young fairy named Claire worked. Claire was your average fairy citizen. She lived the typical day-to-day life that everyone else in Aqua lived, especially those that chose never to leave the tree. In order to keep things running smoothly, everyone had to do their part. This meant waking up and doing your assigned occupation. Some fairies got the unlucky tasks of waste management or border patrol, but Claire was one of the lucky ones, at least in her eyes. She loved working at Leafy Mills. Her cooking skills were not the best, so she stayed out of the kitchen unless one of the cooks needed assistance, but she made up for her lack of culinary prowess by being the best waitress Leafy Mills had ever seen. On top of that, she would run other errands for the owner of Leafy Mills, such as delivering food to her fellow fairies, counting stock, or acquiring resources needed to keep the tavern going. Working in a tavern in Aqua was perfect in Claire's eyes because it was one of the few jobs that guaranteed you would meet new fairies almost every day. Sure, there were regulars, and it was rare for new fairies to find Aqua, but usually if a new fairy was in town, they would eventually make their way to Leafy Mills. This let Claire become familiar with almost everyone in the town, and since she was the most popular hostess working there, these fairies were sure to remember her as well. This led to Claire becoming very popular in Aqua and made business for the Leafy Mills boom. Claire thought that compared to lives outside of Aqua, this was a pretty good gig, and she could see herself living like this for a very long time. Maybe even for the rest of her life. She often thought about meeting another fairy, falling in love, and having babies. Claire was quite the romantic, but she also thought it best to focus on her career for now and settle down when she was ready. One day, her manager had given her a standard delivery order to take care of. The delivery was for one of their regulars, who Claire knew quite well. She helped ready the order and prepare to fly out and deliver it, but something strange happened the moment she exited Leafy Mills. Though she used her tiny wings to fly out of the tavern, this strange phenomenon that seemingly transported her somewhere outside of Aqua, perhaps even outside of the Oakren tree, had her stepping out on her 2 feet. Not only was she now walking instead of flying, she felt large in size as if she had become a normal Rumen or Glivolu. The world in front of her was hazy, as if she existed in a world outside of their own, and far off in the distance she could see a large object burning. She looked around for answers, but only found more fire and destruction. She rushed over to the large burning object, this time taking flight, though still feeling larger than her fairy form. As she drew closer, she could tell it was the Oakren tree ablaze, and among the destruction she saw many Glavolu bodies, including that of the leader of the Glavolu, the great wolf, Neron. Claire rushed to the tree, trying to find the entrance to Aqua, but in her new size she had trouble finding it. Even if she was able to locate it, there would be no way to get in, but this did not stop her from trying. A large explosion sent her crashing to the ground. She got up as quickly as she could and hid behind the tree. A swooping noise followed by the sound of something impacting the ground so hard it made a ditch. Claire once again took flight as fast as she could to distance herself from the tree. That's when she saw the culprit of the horror surrounding her. Claudius, the Emperor of Magia, emerged from the dirt ditch he created, walking slowly in Neron's direction. He spoke as if the dead Glavolu leader could still hear him. "It should not have come to this," the Emperor said, surprisingly somber. Using his own words as cover for her escape, Claire bolted in a direction that would take her as far from her home as possible. But in a sudden flash, the Emperor of Magia was now in front of her, using his hand to palm her face, stopping her mid-flight. "And where do you think you're going, little bug?" A blast of energy began to form in the Emperor's hand, and just as he seemingly ended Claire's life, she returned just outside of Leafy Mills, fluttering in the air, holding her delivery. She turned around and brought the food back to the counter. Her manager was in shock by the quick return. "I can't make this delivery," said Claire. She got a rare, angry look from her manager. "Why not?" Claire was breathing heavily and still trying to process what she had seen. She gathered herself as best as she could and spoke. "I can't make this delivery because I have to warn the Great Wolf."